I'm happy that you're here because when we were at York, I didn't know who I was. I was completely lost. Some random kid. What the hell did I get into music school? My whole life I wanted to be a software engineer. Picked up the guitar,
Mm.
and then now I'm at York. And I met you and a bunch of guys. And I always felt that you were the most normal, put together dude. Like you had a sense of who you were.
I didn't.
You didn't.
See, you know what
I'm
that
glad that
was?
impression is
It's
wrong.
just like, like you can't, I'm trying to figure out kind of what, you know, group I belong to, kind of like what school of thought, like where my principles are. And it's like, if I kind of go too deep into any of them, like it kind of lets people in, and then it's harder to make the choice, right?
Right. That's a really good point.
Yeah, like I think I was just kind of trying to figure out kind of like where I could confidently stand, perhaps. Maybe I'm thinking of too deep about it. Maybe I was just shy. I kind of was a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit shy. I'm definitely way more social now than I was. Yeah.
How would you say you changed from that time to now? Do you feel like you know where you stand and how you stand?
100%. Yeah. I feel way more confident in who I am as a human being, and am excited for like how I can continue to grow moving forward, rather than being like, oh crap, like, I have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, there's still a sense of that, right? But I think that's just part of the human experience.
Definitely.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm excited to keep going. But right now I'm like, yes, like I'm a very confident person, sometimes to a fault, but
That's okay. Somebody's got to be confident, and it might as well be you.
Yeah.
What were some of those moments, some defining moments that led you to be confident in who you are today?
Oh my goodness. Just kind of like, I think just like learning from the mistakes and embracing just like when I found like kind of just like fell flat on my face. And that kind of comes from just like wanting to play guitar so badly, right? And it kind of goes back to like my first like jazz guitar lessons, where I remember the lessons where I walked in thinking I knew what I was doing because I had practiced all week, and then I just got it completely wrong. And then I chose to listen to what my teacher was saying during that lesson. It kind of made sense to me, and I just like went back to the drawing board, and that happened a few times. And at Humber, that was stuff like kind of the non-musical classes were like very humbling to me. Whatever the second year like music history class was, not
Critical
necessarily.
perspectives.
Yeah.
Pete Johnston.
Yes, I had the other teacher.
Oh, there's another one.
Yes.
I don't know the other one. In my head, it's only Pete Johnston.
See, I might be embarrassing myself right now, but me and him did not get along. So I just because I think he didn't like me, but that's okay.
That's okay.
It'll come to me and then I'll mention it. But yeah, no, it's just like I had such terrible grades in that class because I just wasn't studying, and I wasn't, because I thought I was like better than it. And then I came out, and all these other like better, like, well, not better, but great players were also doing well in that class. And I was like, okay, I could learn from this mistake. I could study and practice a little bit at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's still like classes like that, and then like the juries kind of again falling flat on my face when I was super confident. But by then I had kind of learned that, if I go in, giving it my best, and they come at it and say no, or try it from this angle, it's worth checking out, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that helped a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, that kind of helped me. Just like, I was like, okay, I just need to keep pushing forward,
I like that you've always been trying and always pushing yourself. You always seem to have something that you're working on, and that's something that you're striving for, even in your playing. I remember in master class, you'd always, every other week when we would play together or people would play in front of the class, I always noticed that you would try something different, try something new. And I can tell that you've been working on it in the shed, and like always trying to put yourself out there, especially with your guitar playing. And I think that's what, when they say that it's not just talent, it's hard work, I think that's what the hard work looks like. It's like falling flat on your face all the time, always going back to the drawing board and reconsidering how you're going to approach what you're approaching. And I like that you reflected on the non-playing course, for example, because study is a lot more than just our instrument. And it's also, I guess it's also about critical perspectives, in a way. Because when you learn about like history, for example, you have to have a certain perspective. You have to have a certain lens you look at things with. You have to be targeted. Otherwise, you just get lost in the sea of information. And I found that to be quite often the case for me, which is why I also did quite poorly in that class. And I think the way you organize that information is defining on like what are you trying to achieve, and only from there can you find clarity with what you're trying to study, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you found that, but would you say you found that
Found like
clarity?
clarity. Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think I mean kind of post school, like the clarity is that I just need to be patient with myself and kind to myself, and also remember the moments when I'm not in the best headspace to be practicing every single day or to be playing guitar every single day. Or I mean, I do play every day, but not like, you know, cracking down on like this technique or this theory that I need to work on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the serious like shedding. Like there's moments where, and that could be like months or sometimes it's been like a year where like I'm not in the right space to work on that. But that's okay because I always come back to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good.
So yeah, just like being kind and patient with myself is like that. That's the clarity that I needed. You know, I don't have to have it all figured out. This is the most like cliche thing ever, and I hate that I'm saying it, but yeah.
I think in jazz school, we're always quite pressured to do what is asked of us, for sure. I mean, with any degree, any school, and that is what you have to do. But specifically in the music realm, what I found that was most challenging from that critical perspectives course is that we were exposed to so many different types of music. And in the class, as I was listening to the lecture, I for moments I would fall in love with the music and said, I want to dive into that. I want to listen to it. I want to learn it. I want to play it. I want to understand it. And then I leave the class and check my calendar and think, oh crap, I have all the shedding I have to do for this other thing, for the broader sense of the degree. And so it always felt like I was not only disappointing myself in that I had to choose to not pursue something that I was enjoying or that I was very deeply interested in, but I also knew that it was going to result in a poor grade in this course, knowing that I just can't let go of the jazz thing, for example, and I have to take care of that to kind of get by in the grand scheme of things. Similar to how you mentioned with the work hours and that radio thing, like you just want to get your degree.
Yeah.
And it seems like that course piqued a lot of interest in a lot of different directions, but at the end of the day, it's like I can't dive deep into all these bands. I need to get my degree. And that balancing act of where you put your attention in musically and creatively and how you practice is arguably, I would say, one of the hardest challenges as a passionate young learner of music in a degree like that. I'm curious your perspectives or your reflections on that because you also do a lot of different music. You have some folk stuff, you have some rock stuff, but I think from my perspective, you're always a very strong jazz guitarist. So I'm curious how you
Thank you.
balanced. Yeah, yeah, man. I always loved what you were playing.
Thanks.
So I'm curious, how did you balance your musical interest during that time and maybe in comparing to now?
At that point, I just wanted to play. I just wanted to play jazz music. However we want to define jazz music. I wanted to sound convincing, and I put a lot of work into that because I remember thinking like that's kind of my first step is I want to be able to do that convincingly rather than just kind of fumble my way through some changes. Like I've always really liked that type of music. I just want to do that convincingly. I guess that's the best word I can use for that. Right. And I'm just trying to think about what else I was doing at the time. I was playing in Punju, which is like was a super influential band for me. Just like what I learned from my band members and the types of music that they introduced me to, types of music that we were writing, and that was I don't know rock music, post punk, maybe math rock sometimes, like the indie music, like that kind of stuff, right? Like you know the type. It wasn't that hard. It didn't feel that hard to balance everything. Yeah. I mean, I just kind of followed my interest, which was at the time was mostly just jazz music. And then some math rock bands at the time. Like I got into a band called Delta Sleep. They were super influential for me. Eventually Pine Grove, in like my fourth year and after. But yeah, now, I mean, kind of speaking to what you said before about, you know, the balancing act in school. For me, it's kind of being okay with putting something to the side, right? At the time, I thought I was okay with getting bad grades so that I could practice guitar more and also go stay out late, going to the jams and shows and, you know, drinking with people. And like, I thought I was okay with that. And I'm at peace with the decision I made to do that. That's all good. But yeah, it's like being okay with like only, like I'm in a band called High Tea right now. Um, it's like being okay with only practicing high tea music for the entire week, right? And not looking at something else I've been working on.
Yeah.
Or like I know how much work it takes for me to get back into playing standards again. Being okay with, you know, only playing that for a month. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, is I'm playing a lot of that music again, and it's been taking a lot of work to get back into it. So it's kind of just like being okay with just kind of like compartmentalizing and prioritizing my time.
Nice.
Right? Because otherwise you feel like especially as a guitar player, like we all kind of play lots of different genres, right? You're gonna feel like crap because you haven't played a rock guitar solo. You think you're good at it, right? Every guitar player thinks they are, right? But then you go to a jam and you hear someone rip, and you're like, I should be good at that, right? But it's because you haven't played that in a year,
That's a good
right?
point, yeah.
You know, you kind of have to be okay with kind of focusing on one thing at a time. I mean, you know, if you're playing your guitar enough, eventually it'll all just kind of be there. But yeah.
I guess there's a lot of ebbs and flows with musicality and comfort, especially with an instrument like guitar. It is very versatile. We always plug ourselves in a lot of different situations. I think that's where maybe other instrumentalists, like maybe a trumpet player, for example, would find that in a different way, where in the trumpet, you got to keep your armature up, so you play every day. Muscle memory is a big part of it.
Did you play an instrument like that, like trumpet or a woodwind or
For a little while, actually.
trumpet?
Trumpet.
Yeah.
It wasn't too long, only like 3-4 months. At that time, I cut my hands a lot. I was a cook
Mhm.
during all the humper, so I injured my hands too much, so I couldn't play guitar. And I thought it was a backup in case in the future, if I ever cut my hand off, I'll have some trumpet
We
chops.
have one hand left.
Yep.
There's no way. There's guitar players. I've seen some one-handed guitar players do some crazy stuff.
Okay,
But anyways, continue.
Yeah, that's definitely in the books, but
Yeah.
I thought as a backup,
Yeah,
trumpet
yeah.
would be nice. And in that way, because it's in a singular way, I mean, they do plug themselves in a lot of different styles, but I think the playing is less varied than maybe a guitar player, because I mean we have pedals and tones, acoustics, electrics. There's a lot of tonal options that we have to get familiar with to be able to execute, where the trumpet is the trumpet sound, and there's a lot of variety in that as well. So it's in a way it naturally focuses their practice in a certain way that's different than I think guitar players.
It's really easy to get distracted.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when you have the different guitars that do the different things. Yeah. How many guitars do you have?
I have.
You always have to count, eh? When you know you have too many, when you're like, I don't know. Like if you can go 3, or that's good. But anyway, so how many do you have?
4, maybe 5. Well, my student is borrowing one, so I
Yeah,
have
okay.
4. I
Okay.
got 4.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always like, how many like playable ones do you have? I have a lot of just like, you can play them, but guitars I wouldn't count as like.
In that case, I got 3 playable ones.
Okay. Yeah. Because I've got 2 acoustic guitars sitting around the house that are just like kind of just there for teaching and for lending to people, and then I've got an electric guitar for the same reason. It's just like never in tune. It's missing a tuning peg, and I don't count that one.
Yeah. It's more of like a prop than anything.
I think you're a jerk if you're like, I have 20 instruments, but 9 of them are just dusty guitars that you can't play. You know what I mean?
I think so too. Yeah. If you can't if you're not gonna pull it out on a gig, you don't have the instrument.
Exactly. Yes. That's a perfect way to do it. Yeah. So in that case, I think between Alyssa and I, my partner, I think we have 9.
That's solid. I mean, does that feel overwhelming sometimes?
Sometimes I actually work hard to make sure that they all kind of get the attention they deserve. I have a reoccurring date in my calendar. It's one day a month. I think it's on the 3rd. Yeah. It's called Guitar Day. Most months I'm really bad at it, but it's in my calendar and it shows up to remind me because most of the time I keep my guitars on just like a stand, like rack stand. I have a humidifier and everything. Right now, since it's particularly dry, most of my guitars are in hard cases. But anyways, Guitar Day is the day to dust them all off and tune them all and play a bunch of them, just kind of like see where they're at, kind of take stock, which strings are starting to feel rusty. And sometimes I'll literally set a timer for 5 minutes and play each guitar for 5 minutes.
Wow.
And just like stuff like that, so I don't forget about them, right? Yeah.
Do you see your guitars as tools?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah. Well, that's something that the person who has tools would do, you know?
Yeah.
Definitely take care of it, maintain your tools.
Yeah, for
I like
sure.
it a lot.
Yeah, and I don't want to have extra guitars,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't need to have guitars I don't need. So that's kind of part of the process is like, do I still need this guitar in my home? So it takes up space too. Like having that many
Space is
guitars.
expensive as
Oh
well.
my goodness. Yeah. I mean, the physical space of the guitars, but since I put them on stands, there's also the cases. Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm just making sure I still need them. And as so far, I don't want to get rid of any of them.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations that now in this time that everything's settled.
Yeah.
Everything's there.
Yeah.
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 Because the worst thing, honestly, when I think that I either have to get rid of a guitar or buy a new one, I don't sleep. There's at least one night where I don't sleep.
The worst thing about buying a guitar is that you don't sleep.
Yeah.
What makes you lose sleep?
Considering if I actually have to buy that guitar.
Okay, fair enough.
It's like, have I done everything I could in my power to make sure my guitars work for me the way I need to?
Yeah.
Is it a pedal? Is it a pickup? Is it a string? What is it? And then if I'm actually settled on buying a new guitar, it's like, okay, crap. Now I'm shopping. Now I'm testing. Checking my wallet.
Yeah, I know. I felt that buying new guitars, I don't know about selling. I think every guitar I've ever sold has been like, I don't need this anymore.
Nice.
I want this out of here. Yeah.
In my second year, what was interesting about that musical exploration, especially from critical perspectives, is sometimes in the pursuit of trying to find or to capture the sounds of these new bands I was learning about, I'd buy a new guitar. And maybe it might be semi-hollow, might be some different pickup configuration or some pedals to learn what it feels like to get those sounds. While at the same time, I knew I was getting better at my instruments, so I felt more confident to apply my learnings and my skills to these new instruments. So at a certain point, I had like 10 guitars. I was flipping them. I was learning how to repair them. I learned how to solder and change pickups and all that kind of stuff. So I felt confident that I can take care of my instruments through that. But I also, in reflection, realized that like, wow, I was very distracted. I should have just been practicing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but you learned all that stuff too, right? Yeah. And as part of the balancing act is like, I'm getting distracted by this guitar pedal right now, but is that a bad thing?
Not necessarily.
No, there's been sometimes where I wish I knew more about pedals or something, right? If I had been a little bit more distracted by that, maybe I'd know more about guitar pedals.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I remember there's one pedal my friend Christopher Parnas had. It was a Moore Tender Octaver as an octave pedal. It's like this really shitty brand. Sometimes it squeals, the ground humming, it's kind of weird. But when it's working, it's the tightest, cleanest octave I've ever had, ever. And from there, I learned like, okay, an octave is an interesting sound. But for some reason, it got me thinking of the mix all the time. Like, how would I mix this in a record? Or how can I achieve this feeling without any octaves? Is it a EQ thing? Is it a compression thing? And so when I was, that kind of parallel to the time where I was learning how to mix in that time. So guitar pedals, tone, and sound with my instrument almost directly equated to exploring the realm of mixing. So I felt that was, in that way, I convinced myself it was productive.
Yeah.
Yeah. It still is to some degree. I mean, I use a compressor live all the time, knowing that it's not about the sound, it's about how it feels and translates to the speakers, how it consistently sends to front of house, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it helps a lot to present myself in the best way possible. Having explored all those, taking the time to explore those pedals and those sounds.
Yeah, for sure. And it's knowing a little bit about all that stuff it's all good. It helps you be more well-rounded. Like you're going to be in a situation where you're in a studio and something's going on, or you might be in a band on the stage and you're the only person that knows how to fix that pedal or whatever's going on, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of, and it also helps with the perspective as well and kind of like everything you're thinking about, right? Like think about, you have a studio session, it's 8 hours, it's tomorrow. Like, how are you preparing for it? Like, what's going through your head, right? Like, which guitar am I going to use? What pedals am I using? How many cables do I want to bring? Am I going to stand? Am I going to sit? Which headphones am I going to use? Like, do I bring a sweater? Do I bring an energy drink?
Yeah.
Right?
Testing all your cables, making sure everything works, that kind of thing.
So all that stuff, all your gear, kind of how do you prepare kind of physically, but also like just the environment, like, what's it going to sound like? Are the drums going to be in the same room? And just like all this other information that you're bringing with you into the studio that you're kind of thinking about and you're aware of, right? And if there's kind of like one like, let's say there's kind of like a gap in what you're thinking about, like you hadn't considered this factor of the studio, you get there and it's like, knock on wood, that doesn't happen, but it happens where, you know, something happens where you've got this gap in your knowledge and you don't know how to fix it. And now you're like, crap.
Yeah.
Right. So like kind of knowing all those like little things could help, right? It's just,
Definitely.
yeah.
I think a big part of, I think there's like a ritual element to, for me at least, when there's a ritual element to me packing up for a gig or a session. And it's almost like, I don't know if you see those like spy movies where they dismantle their guns and they're cleaning it and they put it back together and it looks super cool. And I kind of feel that way about my gear and my cables. I wrap them very particularly.
Yeah, me
knowing
too.
that they're
Yeah.
very good. Yes, and you're a very proper guy. Like you,
Oh, thank you.
you always keep your shit very neat. And I've always admired that about you.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've always just been a little bit embarrassed when, you know, just like my gear is just not kind of working. I think the more pedals you use, the more room for error is introduced as well. So
Would that be part of the why you kind of built this kind of habit of keeping things really neat and tidy?
yes, and it's also just efficiency.
Yes.
Right? Like when you get to like a show and it's just like some random like promoter, there's 4 bands in the bill, like you're third, so you don't get a sound check, you just get a line check, right?
That was me yesterday.
That was me on Friday.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want to get on and off the stage as quickly as you can. And nothing bugs me more when a band is dragging their feet, you know, after their set, knowing we only get a line check. So, sorry, I'm just touching the mic. Anyways, so I don't want to be that person, right? I'm like on the stage, cables out, plugged in, tuned up, ready to go as quickly as possible, knowing nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? It's just as efficient as possible, because I don't want to be on that stage for 1 minute longer than I have to before or after the set's done. That is right.
Yeah.
So that's like the main motivator.
I've heard that in school and in musical spheres growing up as professional. That was kind of ingrained on me very early on because I did a lot of string orchestra in elementary and high school, and it was always distilled into the students. You get on stage in an orderly fashion with your chairs, with your number.
Yeah.
Everyone marches like soldiers and then resting position. And then when he puts a baton up, your violin's up, and you wait for the beat drop.
Yeah.
That's all you have to worry about.
Yep.
The 6 hours of you hopping on the school bus and, you know, trying to eat your lunch on the bus, but you're not allowed to because you're hungry, and you know you're going to play in like 3 hours, you're not going to eat until then. All that stuff that every person goes through is only to prepare you for that downbeat. And if you're not there on the downbeat, you're fired. I've had some peers fail the course because they missed. So I'll go back a little bit, a little story. One of the rules my conductor had in high school was if you were a minute late being, if your 2 feet are not in the wood floor of the music room by the end of the sound of the bell for the next period, that means you were late. Therefore, you're not allowed to be in that rehearsal. And if you miss the rehearsal the week prior to a big concert or festival, you're not playing in that festival. And if the festival happens to be 50% of your mark, then you lose 50% of your mark. Many students failed, straight up. That complaints with the board, parents complain. And like, this is the rule. This is what it is to be a musician. So I'm very lucky that I learned that very early on. And that translates to me getting on and off stage. But then when you know, for you to be ready for the downbeat as a guitar player, everything's got to work. You got to check your power. You got to make sure all your cables work. Otherwise, you don't hit that downbeat for sound check or even on the gig. Yeah. Then you're fired. Yeah. Failed. You know, to me, it's like very clear. And we, as audience members, as music lovers, when we go see a show, we don't want to see that. We want to see them play and have a good time. And every little room for error has to be accounted for. So I think that's a big part of that.
As the best you can, anyways. Yeah. Obviously, sometimes stuff goes wrong, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, those little things that like. Well, sorry, was this in high school for you?
This was mainly in high school. That story, yeah.
It's funny how those little musical experiences kind of carry over from that age, right? Like, I played trombone for a long time. That instrument will always have a special place in my heart.
Very nice.
In the Hannaford Street Youth Program. So, yeah, and they were very serious about always bringing a pencil to rehearsal. Now, we were kids, so we didn't, and oftentimes they'd have to hand around a basket of pencils, and they kind of get mad at us for it. But I always remembered that, like, bring a pencil to rehearsal. Don't be that guy. And not that I was always perfect with it, but because of that, I put a pencil in every single one of my guitar cases.
Yeah.
So I'd never be without it. But I was kind of like astounded by the number of our peers that would kind of forget pencils.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds terrible, like I'm kind of blaming everyone at Humber, and I brought a pencil and you didn't. But no, I was just as bad, right?
Mm.
I think I was more astounded at the fact that I would forget a pencil and a teacher or a peer would hand me a pencil and, God forbid, sometimes a pen.
Yes.
You know?
If somebody handed me a pen in a rehearsal room, I looked at them different.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing? This
Yeah.
is like, I'd rather run to the store and get a pencil than you hand me a pen.
Yeah.
I'd rather you offer to like run to your room or something to give me a pencil than you hand me a pen.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, just like the,
it feels wrong.
and if it's a blue pen, just the blue marking up, it's just like, you're going to take this sheet of music and you're going to put it in a folder. It's going to go into the back of your closet until you move out to go to college, okay? And you're going to take that stuff. If you're still a guitar player, you'll probably still have that sheet of music. I mean, like, not everyone's like this, but like, I have like everything still from when I started taking like jazz guitar lessons for the first time. But anyways, yeah, the pencil thing. Yeah. Like, but teachers were not like, there's some teachers that wouldn't give me crap for it. And I was like bracing myself because I didn't have a pencil. Yeah.
PTSD.
So, so I'm not crapping on our peers here. I know they might watch this. It's not kind of my intention. It's just that I would forget a pencil and no one would yell at me.
Yeah. One of my stand partners in high school, he always forget to bring either a pen or a pencil, regardless of what it was. And then one day he had a pen, and I didn't have my pencil with me. I fucked up. I forgot it. But there's no way in hell I'd mark it with the pen. I just remember the notes for the rehearsal. I found a pencil after. And I pick it up. But he was like, I need to remember this because I don't know how to. I'm gonna forget this.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought his pen and he started marking up the score, and it was one of those original tall pieces.
Yeah, you gotta hand it back at the end of the school year.
Hand it back. And he fucked it up, so I'm scratching shit out. I'm like, dude, 2 bars are missing now. What the hell? Luckily, I memorized the music because at that time I couldn't really read too well.
Yeah.
So I like write in the note names lightly, memorize the part, erase everything, and then just show up having it memorized as best I can. And hopefully I can fucking play this tune. And then, he marked it up, and the conductor was coming around checking our tuning. And he dropped his tuner. He was really pissed because he saw all the blue ink on the sheet. And he was like, hey, come to my office. And you just hear him getting screamed at for like half an hour.
Oh no.
And he was like, you know how much this costs? You know what you're doing? You never listen, this and that. And then he brought him up to the stage and he's like, okay, he gave him money. He gave him like $20 or something out of his wallet because like now he had to pay for the music.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone was like, oh shit, I don't have $20. I'm like 15 years old. How am I supposed to pay for this shit?
Yeah.
It's like everyone brings a pencil. And that was like a big lesson for everybody.
Yeah.
And very embarrassing as well.
Yeah.
And those little things, I think those experiences that we build on over time is what accumulates to how we operate now. I think the biggest advantage to all those little things of being prepared, being efficient, allows us the opportunity in the moment when we face something that we don't know. Now we have the capacity, if not even some tools, to tackle that situation that we don't know. In a studio, for example, if you don't know what the hell's happening with your shit, you know all the variables that you've kind of been aware of, you've maintained. You know what patch cable might mess up.
Yeah.
You know where the ground lift might be that you might want to check. And then if you run out of all your options, you ask for help.
Yep.
And at that point, if the person who's supposed to be in charge, who knows how to use it, also is like, this is not working, I think it's fucked.
Yeah.
Then it's fucked. And you just got to figure it out.
You get there so much faster, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. Not that my gear's not perfect, right? I cut corners. I have like some cables on my pedal board that are like really cheap, like little cables, right?
Yeah.
But I know kind of where the room for error is. So like those cables, right? In terms of like hum and everything, I've kind of was kind of meticulous in the way I set up my pedal board so that, power cables aren't crossing over with audio cables as much as possible and all that stuff. But like I know where the small variables are. So my crappy little patch cables are what I would check first. And then also I know that I've been having a little bit of issues plugging into my amp recently. I'll just be playing, all of a sudden it buzzes, and then I unplug it and plug it back in again. So I think that's one of my patch cables starting to go out on me a little bit.
Possible.
Yeah. So at least I know that. But I usually bring 3 patch cables to every show, usually.
Nice.
Yeah. So I have an extra one. But
lately, on occasion, if I have a gig that I'm like, I don't really want to be at, but I got to show up.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just bring my little wireless receivers straight into the amp.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I bring. I don't even check if I charge them or not.
That's so funny.
And
You're like, oh, well, I guess I got to go home because it's not charged.
I mean, I wouldn't like go home exactly, but I would know consciously when I leave the door for that gig thinking,
yeah,
I could be all the prepared. I know how to be prepared.
That's
I'm making a decision to.
Yeah. That's the equivalent of like not checking to see if your homework is in your backpack before going to school, right? Like, you know, like,
gambling.
Oh yeah, oh, I forgot it at home. You know how many times I use that excuse in school?
How many times?
Just like more than I can count. I forgot it at home.
Oh man, at a certain point, it was harder for me to make excuses rather than just saying I didn't do the homework. I don't care about the scores.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll listen in class. I'll try not to be disrespectful, but really, I didn't want to do this homework.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah.
And the teacher would be like, you know what? I respect that, but I still don't like you.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of got through school for the most part.
Yeah.
Tell me about the bands that you're working on now. So you have High Tea, and you had an album with a record with RONI. RONI.
Yeah.
Apologize.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. So the RONI album came out December, I think in December. It's got 7 songs on it, I think. So that has been a recording project mainly. We got to get our stuff together. I think it's like kind of on me to sort of like start looking for venues a little bit, but we talked about doing a show. We almost did a show at one point a few years back. One of us caught COVID. Okay, they got better. Another person caught COVID. They got better. Another person caught COVID. Finally, like, we're a week out from the show, and I caught COVID right before the actual show. So I was the last person who hadn't gotten sick.
Brutal.
Show was canceled. But yeah, it's been a long time like composition and composition project with my friend Jordan Mazza, who you know.
Yes.
We've been writing music together, and like we love that music. Like we poured a lot of just art, I don't know, art and creativity into that music, and that was like, we love this. So we were like, we got to do something with this, and it just kind of wasn't really in the cards logistically to like make it a like full-time performing band. So we recorded 7 songs. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah, we recorded 7 songs, and that came out, and it's just crazy because some of those songs were written maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Like some of the ones that Jordan wrote, I think I don't even know, probably predate when we started like working together. So some of the ones she wrote specifically, yeah, I don't even know, maybe even older. But so that's a crazy one that project finally came to fruition, and that's out. So that's RONI. And then there's High Tea, and High Tea is Jake, Nate, and Elam. Jake and Nate were both in Punchu as well. Punchu is an EP out there in the world if anyone wants to check it out. But that was the band I mentioned before. But yeah, so Jake and Nate were in Punchu. Jake played bass on the RONI record. Well, he plays bass in RONI. It is a band. And he played like a huge role in producing it as well. Like was kind of the reason why it really all came together.
Wow.
Yeah, so he did a really good job with that. Yeah. So High Tea. Yeah. So Jake, Elam, and Nate and myself, and it's just kind of it almost takes like part of like what like Punchu's experimental style and kind of just like we're just it's like kind of punk rock. It's a little bit math rock, but like mostly we like to experiment with just like textures and weird sounds. Like we all have pedals, and we were a really big fan of like improvised, almost free jazz sounding soundscapes. And some of that leaks into the compositions itself. Sometimes it's just an interlude. But we really like to sort of like blur that line between like, okay, this is like a very clear like verse right now, and then it starts getting more abstract, and then it pushes and pulls between like abstract and something that you're kind of familiar with.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what High Tea is. It feels very experimental, but in a way that feels very right.
I like that.
Yeah.
Why the name High Tea?
I don't know. That's a question for Jake and Nate, actually, because they started this project years ago. Nate was playing drums and Jake was playing guitar. there's writing music, and it was just very like chaotic sounding math rock mostly. And it's just the two of them as instrumental. And they've always wanted to explore it further, turn into something. They played maybe 1 or 2 gigs, the duo. And then about a year and a half ago, is when I was recruited to play second fiddle or second guitar, however you want to call that. And then Ellen plays bass. And now it's like a full like gigging, and we're recording and got merch, doing the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know about the name, but I like it.
Yeah.
I do like the
I
name.
like it too.
Yeah. And then I also have to mention Aly and Ger. So my partner,
Yes.
Alyssa, and I, Alyssa also went to Humber. Is for anyone listening, you know this, but anyone listening, Alyssa also went to Humber as a vocalist and guitar player. And we've got our duo. It's called Aly and Ger because it's a cute name and it's catchy. And yeah, it's just our little gigging duo.
Mm-hmm.
We're hoping to get some more gigs playing at different whatever together.
Nice.
Yeah, so those are the 3 main things for me.
She comes from like a very folk singer-songwriter background, right?
Yeah, yes, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was it applying your, I guess, variety of guitar styles in that project? Do you feel the need to do non-singer-songwriter type of things, or have you found a way to kind of focus it in to what you're trying to accomplish in that type of style, that the vibe?
Yeah, I'm trying to focus what I know about guitar more into the style rather than like pulling out of it a little bit. I'm trying to just make that style sound like as good as I can.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than trying to take an Ed Sheeran song and make it sound like a jazz guitar player is playing it, or make it sound like a rock guitar player is playing it. Maybe
or
I
put
can
it into 7.
Pardon?
Or put it into 7.
Or put it into 7. Yeah. I'm not opposed to stuff like that. I just want it. I don't want it to sound like we're trying to show off or like whatever. One of my high school music teachers, who's like still a friend of mine, Amy Peck. Hi, Amy, if you're listening to this.
Hi, Amy.
Said to us once in high school, Amy Peck was also Jake's music teacher.
Cool.
And Jordan's music teacher too. I think, yeah, out of the people I've mentioned so far. And we were really into prog music at the time. And I remember her telling me, like, guys, don't write a song in a crazy time signature just to write a song in a crazy time signature.
Words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I didn't understand at the time. I'm like, what are you talking about? 11/8 is awesome. Is it not cool? No, because then it becomes a math equation, right? I think there's a difference between like, putting 11/8 into Sibelius and just stringing a bunch of notes together, and then between that and just picking up your guitar and playing a rhythm that just happens to come out into 11/8. And I think that just comes from like what you listen to and everything else, right?
How you feel it as well, I think.
Yeah. So if I'm playing an Ed Sheeran chord progression and it comes out into 7/4 and it just kind of works, like, okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, that's kind of my answer for that. Yeah, Alyssa's teaching me a lot as well. We're working on some arranging, and like there's times where I don't know. There's a lot of times where I suggest an idea and her counter idea, or maybe let's not do that here or do it somewhere else. I was like, okay, that's really cool because I wouldn't have thought about that.
Yeah.
And also just like she's helping me kind of just focus my guitar playing into that style more, which is super helpful. Also, her repertoire is super handy, like just teaching me about, what types of artists and what types of songs, like little stuff like I'm trying to think of an example, but, like when you're playing jazz music at a wedding and you've got a vocalist, you have to think a little bit more about, the words.
Yes.
Right? And it's something I never considered. If I'm just playing duo or trio, you can play any jazz standard. I mean, you might not want to play like giant steps, but you know what I mean? Like Great American Songbook style. But there are a lot of those songs that are about, heartbreak or, like some songs are more promiscuous than others, right? Doesn't feel appropriate for like a ceremony of love.
Right.
And she's like, we can't sing this. We can't do this. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's jazz music. No, you can't,
Yes,
right? You have to, so it's little stuff like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
She definitely tackles the essence of what the song is trying to capture, I think.
Yeah.
And in a way, in that simplicity, allows for the nuance of the song to come through.
Yeah, and I'm such a bad lyric listener. I'm trying to get better at it, but I'm such a like I just want to hear the music and I hear the melody, but I always go to the meaning of the song kind of second.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's really good at just like hearing a song and just like, feeling it immediately like, oh, this is like this song is about this. I'm like, that's not what I heard. I heard the music, right? So she's a big help with that too.
It's very interesting. I think we all have our natural predispositions to what speaks to us when we listen to music or connect with music. And in a way, that I think that shapes our trajectory for the decisions we make of what we study, and how we choose our time. I think it's like an acknowledgement that, like, if you're to focus on one thing, you're choosing not to focus on the 10 other things you could be focusing on. And those decisions accumulate over time to kind of shape each musician's musicality. But when we come together in moments for a common goal, for example, any project, any band, or you working with Alyssa, then you have a chance to hear and for them to share not only your kind of concentrated ethos of what you stand for as a musician, but you get to collaborate with what they stand for as well. And only when that communication is like fluid, free, and open and honest can the music make more sense together. The musicians can make more sense together rather than not. With And that comes with saying no. That comes with saying yes. That comes with actually sharing your idea of, like, I think I hear this. This might sound good, and the other person saying no. This is not going to sound good because now all of a sudden this love song it doesn't feel like a love song anymore. It's kind of something like that. So it's always a good thing to come together to make music, regardless of what we think is best for the music.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like an overarching theme of this entire discussion is kind of keep an open mind with everything you're doing, right?
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Any young musicians watching out there, keep an open mind. I don't know.
Well done.
Yeah.
I'm curious more about your composition process. Have you tried to put that into words? Because it sounds like there's a lot of textures and soundscapes with high T. And I imagine with Punch You was maybe, this sounds awesome, let's play it in 11.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sort of differentiate the two a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not as familiar with Punch You as I am with high T. I've listened to some of the high T stuff, but I'm still not super familiar with that in that sense. So I could be characterizing it wrong.
Yeah. No, that kind of feels right. Yeah, there were a lot of moments in Punch You where it's like, this sounds awesome, let's do it. Yeah. And that was like, that band was like, we were all really trying to like find our sound, like in an indie rock band of some sort, right? I think for all of us, like especially Jake and Nate, they played in a lot of bands over the years. Like I think Punch You allowed the most room for not experimentation in the sense that we're going to use weird sounds and weird harmony, non-functional, whatever, but just like stylistically, right? Is it going to be something that's like a little bit more punk rock, a little bit more math rock? Is it going to be a little bit more, I don't know, like dream poppy or whatever, right? We kind of went all over the place a little bit with Punch You. Yeah. I forget what the original question was.
Putting your compositional process into words.
Oh my God. Can you do that?
I can try.
Okay, you go first.
Okay. As I go through my life, there's moments where I'm incredibly attuned to a specific moment.
You're already more deep than I would have been.
Oh.
But keep going. Anyways, keep
Okay.
going. Yeah. Okay.
And from that moment, I have the urge to nurture it in a way. And usually when I do so in my own company, I try to accompany myself and I bring out the guitar, connect sounds to it. And I try to paint the picture of what I'm seeing, as well as feeling what I think is at the core of what that experience is. And if I can make a musical representation of what I'm seeing as far as the painting goes, and I'm able to recreate some echo of that emotion, to me, that is the foundation of what a song is. from there, I let it settle. Usually takes a month, sometimes years for it to just sit there. And then all of a sudden, oh, cool. I think a drum groove was going to work well with this. And then I start going to pre-production, applying all my skills and be like, now I'm at work.
Mm-hmm.
But the capturing the essence of the song is often like a 30-second voice memo or something like that.
Yeah.
And if every time I listen to the voice memo, I feel what I felt in that moment, I've successfully captured a song.
And what is that essence? Like a chord progression or a riff or a melody or lyrics even?
Bits and pieces of all of it.
Okay.
In all different ratios. Sometimes it's a hook where the lyrics are less significant than the melodic idea. Sometimes it is a chord progression, how it feels through time, specific tempo. 2 BPM off is not going to feel the right way,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Other times it is more fleshed out, where it is a whole band arrangement that I get off the top. Like, usually it hits me, I can hear all the parts, I dump it into Logic, and that's like 6 hours of just like hardcore focus to capture that sound. And then, yeah, so it's a bit of a mix of ratios in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, stylistically, it goes all over the map. Sometimes it's like, sometimes it's jazz, sometimes it's heavy metal, sometimes it's kind of this indie chorusy stuff. Sometimes it's just me clapping and vocal a cappella kind of thing. So it really varies what sound or stylistic things capture that emotion or that song. But it's always from the point of view that this moment that I'm trying to capture, this thing I recognize in my life, needs to be served, and whatever style seems to serve it the best is what I try to capture or try to pursue and build my practice towards to capture that stylistic sound.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like any of your compositions can kind of cross over stylistically? Like something that's like jazz, maybe not as jazz, or something that's like different style, but you bring it into an improvisation sort of scenario?
100%.
Yeah.
I think with the stuff that I write in my own compositions in some degree, I it's really hard for me to put a genre on any of it.
Yeah.
And it borrows from just like what the music needs. If it needs a moment of breathing room for improvisation, then the question is not a matter of like, what do I improvise? It's what is a scene? What is the environment? What does it feel that I'm trying to capture for that moment? Why do I make the decision to allow the musician to improvise in this moment rather than writing out a solo for them?
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's because in the context of painting the picture, I'm also imagining like a little movie, a little scene, and in that moment, it's kind of like, what's the word, exposition.
Mm-hmm.
For maybe the first half of the song is exposition. Then we get to the solo. It's like, now I'm telling the story. But at that point, the story can change within the context of this world that I've created, and therefore the appropriate function or appropriate tool is in an improvisational section. But at other times where it's like, no, this character is really defined. I need the audience to know exactly what this character is going through, so then I write out a whole solo, a whole part, and it's all note by note based. So it comes from that, yeah. And that's where it's really hard to define jazz versus not jazz, improvisational versus non-improvisational music, and it's just, it is what it is at a certain point.
Yeah, I favor the word improvised music, right? I think it serves the music community to be specific when we're talking about jazz music as a form of Black American music.
You're right.
You know what I mean?
I like that. Yeah, it's a good distinction.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't want to call everything that's improvised music jazz music, right? You know. But anyways, I think where we sort of are similar is, like, I too have a lot of random voice memos. And sometimes, yeah, it's me just kind of like singing a rhythm. I've been in my car before and I've thought of a rhythm and it's just like, voice memo, or like teaching on a crappy like nylon string guitar. And then I'll show you one later. I've got one on my phone right now. It's kind of funny.
Cool.
Yeah, so I think like it'll either happen with a voice memo or my favorite compositions of mine have always just started when I've not planned to sit down and write music, right? I'm either, in between, essays or like whatever. Like I'm just like, I pick up my guitar for what I think is just 5 minutes before I have to leave, and then I end up writing something. Or I sit down to practice and I play something. I'm like, this is cool. Let's see where this goes. I can't think of a scenario where I've sat down with the intent of writing a song and it's been better than anything else that's been spontaneous, right? Like, I think about all the songs I've written for assignments at Humber, and those are my worst tunes. They're okay, but they're not as good as the other ones. And I think that's the essence you were talking about, right? It's just like the spontaneous, this sounds good, let's develop this idea. That's where all of my best songs have started. And that's like same, that goes for like all of my like improvised music, all my jazz stuff, like all the RONI songs that I started. There's like a couple high T songs that like the band hasn't completely formed together, but a couple high T songs I've written. Like the few like punchy songs I put together, it's all started that way. I haven't intended to write a song. And then also I feel almost everything I write can kind of transfer in a way to either solo guitar or like a stripped down like trio almost, which is kind of weird. And sometimes like if we took like a punchy song I wrote or a high T song and did that, might sound a lot different, but I think there's a way to do it. And I think that's kind of at the backbone of all of my music. Like we're gonna play a song today that was not intended to be instrumental, but we're gonna try and make it that way. By the way, that song is not my song. Actually, Jordan wrote that one. I do have to say that.
Cool.
So, but yeah.
I like that. If I have something to be, I think I resonate with the idea that it can be stripped down to like a trio, for example. I played with a band called Full Deck, and it was initially a 4-piece. I started on bass. Now we're a trio where I'm on guitar. And a lot of our older songs, I've tried to arrange where I can bring in the lead parts with the rhythm and in that way. And I realized that it actually works better for the songs that we're trying to sing and perform, because this music is very much like, it's like a songwriter just putting some distortion on with a drummer. It's very much kind of like Beatles in a way. It's a sing-songy song. You want to sing along to it. You want to enjoy it as you go.
You just say your band is like the Beatles? Sorry, I couldn't let that one go. Anyways,
maybe I'll have to
our
take that
band
one
is
back.
kind of like the Beatles. We're good.
Well, because we have our anyways, we don't need to go there. I'll probably get canceled.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Keep
Apologize.
going.
Okay.
No.
And so from that point of view, it's being on one guitar now. It's kind of like, what is the essence of this, and how can I strip it down? But I realized like it actually sounds bigger that way, and it's kind of what's the word? Flip my expectations on what I thought the band was, and now what it could be as well. Where now that we know we can do this as a trio in a way, stripped down instrumentation, there's also a whole world of possibilities within it. So the creativity comes within the bounds. And I've been writing some crazy shit for it, where it sounds huge compared to what it could be, but it could also bring it right down. So there's a lot of dynamics involved with clarity, in my opinion, from that point of view. When the musical idea is clear, it can be stripped down, but it can also be arranged for a whole orchestra in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting how you stripped it down and you're like, it sounds bigger now.
Yeah.
Right?
More impactful.
Yeah.
I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I think there's like more space for the individual sound sources or instruments or musicians, however you want to look at it, to sort of expand a little bit, right? Yeah. Like I think about like some of the like improvised soundscape stuff that High T does, like in between our songs. I'm playing a crap ton of notes with a weird effect on, right? And, and like Jake's kind of doing the same thing, and Alan's doing the same thing on bass. But it's like, that might be it in terms of like how many musicians we can have doing that. Like there's 3 of us, and I guess there's Nate's going nuts on the drums behind us too. But if we had another guitar player, like a 4th guitar player, it would might be a little bit too much. And then if we had a 5th one, it's just like, I'm not listening to that,
At a certain point, there's like physically not enough space for the sound to actually hit your ears.
Yeah.
Like if you were to play that in a room, none of the instruments will reach the audience's ears the way you intend it to be.
Yeah.
Because it's just saturated, really. Unless you got like the best mix engineer in the world.
Yeah.
And no amps on stage.
And that's why, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that, like, the Ornette Coleman album where there's 2 quartets playing at the same time.
I don't know that one.
I think it's literally just called free jazz.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure like one quartet is mixed in down the left and the other one's mixed down the right, which is so crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But like that's just kind of how that has. I could be completely off the beat in with what that album was called and if that was actually happened, but that's what I recall. Yeah.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about that is like that makes more sense as a record. But if you were to have those two quartets in a room, you wouldn't get separation. You just get two quartets in a room.
I would, yeah.
And then
Yeah, that's true.
What do you do with
that? You're like, what? Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's funny. I feel like free jazz and just crazy ideas like that. I think that's how non-jazz listeners kind of view this type of music.
Right.
You know what I mean? Before I listen to jazz music, I picture what free jazz actually is, and that's kind of how I viewed it, you know?
Yeah.
Like listening to like Kind of Blue when I was in, you know, grade 10, thinking that I liked jazz music is just kind of getting through it. I'm just like, I don't understand. This is the best one. This is the best selling jazz record and the most famous one. This one, I love Kind of Blue. It's great. And obviously like that was before I kind of, my palate had expanded, but yeah.
There's something about I like what you said, the palate like expanding. There's a lot of similarities with food tastes that kind of parallel with music. But I also think about that in terms of learning and teaching, because I know you also do some teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how.
Hit me up for lessons. Anyways, I had to put that in there.
Perfect.
We can clip that.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
You want to do one more take?
Yeah, sure. Hit me up for guitar lessons. Okay. Anyways.
Perfect. How has teaching helped you expand your palate?
It's like forced me to learn some songs that I maybe would have ignored, like the classic guitar lesson songs. And I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of fun to learn. Stuff like Nothing Else Matters by Metallica and Blackbird.
Yeah.
You know, is a classic. I actually didn't know those ones. There might have been a few others, but those are two classics.
For me, it's Highway to Hell.
Highway to Hell, sure.
That's one.
Yeah, and guitar solos, right? Like I learned the You Shook Me All Night Long guitar solo, which is actually awesome. And to mimic the bending and the vibrato and the pinch harmonics on that solo is actually a lot harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
Trying to sound like Angus Young or like he's using a pentatonic scale. I'm like, yeah, but he's doing it way better than you can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that I think that probably in that respect. And also like some of my students in the past like 2, 3, 4 years have introduced me to some bands that I love now.
Great.
Yeah, I had this one student who was, you know, maybe a decade, I don't want to like insult them, but a decade or 2 decades older, maybe I'm gonna say decade, you know,
Yeah.
had kids kind of deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Introduced me to a band called First Aid Kit. Have you heard of them before?
Briefly.
I feel like
Yeah,
I feel like you would dig First Aid Kit. Just like I think they're Swedish. I could be getting that wrong. But just like a indie folk band. Yeah, they're awesome. I don't know. They introduced me to First Aid Kit, and I became obsessed instantly because they wanted to learn a First Aid Kit song on ukulele.
Hell yeah.
So I learned the song. We showed it on ukulele. I checked them out. I'm like, this band is awesome. I saw them play at Echo Beach at the Ontario place. Rest in peace. I don't think it's there anymore.
Oh.
Right, because the construction's going on there. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So like First Aid
Brutal.
Kit. So that's like really cool. Yeah, just like a few others. I'm at lost an example right now, but like just introducing me to songs I would not have otherwise known about.
That's good.
Yeah.
What about like approaches to the instrument itself? Because I know it's very common where when you try to teach somebody something, you also learn a little different perspective on what that thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So has teaching your students changed the way you look at your own practice and as yourself as a guitarist?
Technique-wise, probably not. Sort of my practice ethic, I think, it's kept me honest about that. Because I've noticed I feel like a way better teacher when I'm practicing, right?
Yeah.
So it keeps. I'm not going to say that's what keeps me practicing the guitar, but I notice a correlation when I start to feel like, you know, the lessons are whizzing by and like, you know, I'm not as present in all of my lessons, you know, kind of trying to get through the day kind of deal, right? When that feeling comes, I don't feel like as good of a guitar teacher, and that correlates with me not practicing as much. So if I haven't been practicing as much, I don't feel as present during my lessons, and I don't feel as competent of a guitar teacher. Like I'm sure, do you ever have those feelings during a lesson? You're like, I am not a good guitar teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have those days.
This is a terrible advertising right after I said take lessons with me.
I
But
don't think so. It shows that you're honest because
yeah,
what you're describing is like there's no hiding from the truth,
yeah.
really.
And I can tell,
Yeah.
like, I can tell, sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
go ahead.
I can tell an 8-year-old that they need to go practice confidently because I practiced an hour that day, right?
Mhm.
You know, if I had, I feel like a hypocrite if I hadn't been practicing for a whole week and then I tell them they need to go home and practice for 15 minutes a day or even 15 minutes once because, you know, like Lord knows it's like pulling teeth sometimes with kids.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I can't look them in the eye and tell them you need to go practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. Like I can, if I'm practicing, I can say like, hey, I get it. You have weeks, sometimes you have months, and as I mentioned, sometimes you have a year, right? But you know, there's only so much we can do during your lesson, right? You have to play a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely feel that way in the same way where it's not necessarily too much about diligent practice sessions. It's like if there's kids learning a song, if I can play the song and I figured it out and I can play for them front to back, then I've got that in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that I'm capable now confidently to show them this is what you got to do. This is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And whether I learned that in 5 minutes or if I learned it, it took me like a whole week to learn, I had to get it done, regardless of the time frame. So for me, in my head, it's not necessarily just about the time; it's achieving the goal. And I've learned that sometimes I can learn a song very quickly. Sometimes I learn it right there when they play it for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
and just write it out for them, done.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's a task of how can I communicate what they need to hear for them to get there as well. And usually, when I feel like I'm being a good teacher that day, I've communicated well.
Mm-hmm.
I've understood them. I've empathized with them. I know where they're coming from. I've learned enough from all the little anecdotes of other day and their week that while they have hockey practice, while they have a fight with their mom, all these little things that come into play. So I kind of have an idea, vague idea, very brief idea of what it would take for them to sit down and practice peacefully and focused. Mm-hmm. And some students have that harder than others. Some are just overextended. They really want to practice, but they're also in dance. They're also in all these extracurriculars. And they have a very strict bedtime and that kind of stuff. So at that point, it is a matter of finding the time. And now all of a sudden, the lesson isn't just learning guitar and practicing scales. It's how do you manage your time and how do you approach your work? Mm-hmm. And I'm teaching this like 7-year-old how to time manage. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. But when I can't understand where they're coming from, that's when I feel like I'm not being a good teacher. Mm-hmm. I've lost that connect. And usually that's when I've lost the connection with myself. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it is, I feel insecure because I didn't play guitar this week at all. I was doing all these other things. Other times it's like I didn't sleep well and I'm not in the right headspace. Like I'm kind of down on myself. I'm beating myself up, and therefore that discouragement is kind of like feeding into the room, and I can sense that the student feels that as well in those lessons. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I've done a disservice because that's not the energy I want to share with them.
I think on either side of it, it's having a certain amount of patience, right? Like if you hadn't gotten enough sleep, you haven't played your guitar in 2 weeks, you go into a lesson, and then they also hadn't practiced. You're like already not feeling good. And the fact that kid didn't practice what you told them to practice from the previous week, you're like, oh, like, what are we going to do? Like, I didn't have a lesson plan, right? And then you might take it out on them like, kid, if you practiced, we would have been able to move on, but now you're not. And I have to be in a room for you for 45 minutes, right? And go over the same thing we did last week. And it's like pulling teeth, right? Whereas like, if you go into that with a little bit more patience, you might be a little bit kinder to them. And then you're like, okay, let's actually see what happened during your week. And maybe you just need a little bit more compassion for me. And then the other side is I practiced for an hour every single day this week. And then the student comes in and they hadn't practiced. And you're like, I practiced. I feel like you should have. Right. And that's also where you need some patience.
Right. I think in either of those scenarios on the negative side, there's some blame put on one or the other. Mm-hmm. And I think that blame is different than motivation. And in those moments, you have to lead with compassion and bring space in that situation. One of my oldest students, he's a grown man, he has kids, runs a couple of businesses. Sometimes he just doesn't show up for his lesson. And I'm like, oh, initially I was very disappointed. I thought maybe I don't have his number, maybe he forgot. And then he just said, hey man, sometimes I'm just not going to show up. I'm busy and I'm tired at the end of the day. And I was like, okay, that's your decision. And sometimes he feels really insecure because he hasn't practiced. He's like, I'm basically tired at the end of the day. So when he does show up, I said, well, now's the time to practice. Here we can practice together. And I've been like lecturing him in a way of like, you have to forgive yourself, and you can't be hard on yourself. And discouragement is not motivation. Motivation is motivation. Honesty is honesty. You can't lie to yourself one way or another. And you can't also you can't compare yourself to others, because you don't know what you don't know what their lives are like. And at the end of the day, we can always try to compare ourselves to other people, thinking that they're so much better than me. They practice all the time. How I can't practice all the time, etc. You kind of feel that weight in a way, that burden, but it doesn't equate to anything. But the only person you can compare yourself is to who you are yesterday, and who you are today, and who you want to be tomorrow. Only then, at that point, you're just fighting yourself, and you gotta choose to fight yourself or work with yourself. And that's what practice is really. In order to sit down and practice, you have to acknowledge the gap of where you want to go versus where you are. And in the middle of that distance, that big canyon, is you as a failure. But really, it's you getting to where you want to get to. And
For sure.
Only if you can see that, then you can progress.
With that point of view, you're never really failing at an instrument, right? Because you're always just trying to get somewhere. So what is the failure?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Unless you like, if you put, if you put a deadline on yourself, perhaps, I'm learning this guitar solo before Wednesday, and you don't, yeah, perhaps you failed at that. Doesn't mean you failed at playing guitar.
Yeah.
Right?
Just means you didn't learn it in time.
Yeah.
And hopefully the consequences are not dire.
Yeah.
But let's say you are on the gig on that Wednesday night and you didn't learn the solo. Well, now you're writing your own solo.
You're screwed.
On stage.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's either that or...
We could talk about how to do that in my guitar lessons, how to come up with your own guitar solo for You Shook Me All Night Long instead of the Angus Young one. Might not be as good, but it'll be something.
Perfect.
I had a thought, that like an actual intelligent thought, that just escaped my brain just so I could try to be funny for a second.
I guess we are two comedians.
Yeah. Wannabe comedians. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because one reason why I pursued music rather than going into the military, being a software engineer, being a mechanic, or being a cook for the rest of my life, is that the worst thing that can happen, especially as a guitar player, is you get electrocuted with a grounding issue on stage. Otherwise, nobody dies. Nobody gets hurt. You might like scrape yourself.
That's funny that's the worst thing for you. For me, it's getting my guitar stolen.
Fair.
I'm scared of that. I'm really scared of that.
Oh.
You're like, I might get electrocuted. I'm like, I might have the most expensive thing I own just taken from me. But anyways, yeah.
I operate under the assumption that all of my positions are up for grabs. Because if I can grab it, somebody else can grab it too.
I got two hands. That's two guitars on the way out of here today.
Well,
if that's your principle.
Try.
Yeah.
You can try for sure. Because I also have two hands. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, true.
Yeah, and I guess it's interesting the priority or the relationship we have with what we think is failure or the worst, in some degree. To me, failure is like just dying. So that means I can't have more failures if I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like that is the ultimate failure.
Yeah. Just dying, yeah.
But it's gonna happen. So I guess music in a way is less lethal than other lines of work that I may have considered in the past. And for that reason, the idea of failure or the feeling of failure can always be mitigated knowing that nobody died. Nobody got fatally injured. We haven't harmed anybody other than our own ego, really, or our playing into our insecurities. And that's just an emotional damage, really. But you can always recover from emotional damage, assuming that you haven't permanently rewired your brain, which is a whole other topic than just music.
Yeah, for sure. That's a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah.
Programming or indoctrination, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Or like trauma.
Yeah.
I'm not qualified to speak on that, really. I got anecdotes.
Is anyone?
Assuming that if you have, like, I don't know, a background in psychology and, like, trauma therapy.
I just insulted anyone watching this who does have a background in that. Just by saying, are you qualified to speak about my trauma? Probably.
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. And if they said yes, then they can defend themselves. You know what I'm saying?
That's like the first step in like therapy is getting the person to trust that they're qualified enough, right?
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
But anyways, we're getting off topic.
Well, it relates to music in a way. Like, if you trust in, let's say you're practicing and you feel like you're not good enough, you gotta, in order to actually get better, you have to acknowledge that, hey, maybe I am not good enough. I'm actually not good at this thing. But what is this thing I'm not good at? For example, I'm trying to learn a major scale. I can't play it in time with the metronome. Let's say there's that. I know all the notes, but I can't play it in time with the metronome. 80 BPM is too fast. Okay, great. Now all of a sudden you know what you're not good at. That's step one. Now you know how to know how to get there. But if you're just like, I'm bad, I can't play the major scale, it's like, okay, what about it? Like, what exactly about that can you not do?
Right.
And unless you identify it, then you can't progress.
But also letting that go too, right? Like being okay with not being able to play that major scale well, right? That's the Kenny Werner thing. Is like you have to be okay just not being good and potentially never being good, whatever you think good is. Like potentially never sounding the way that you want to. You have to let that go to actually sound the way that you want to. It's a weird paradox, right?
Yeah.
Have you read Effortless Mastery?
Not yet.
Not yet? Sorry, it just seems like your kind of book.
Well, it sounds like a great book.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, I got a copy. I'll lend it to you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I recently finished Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, so that's where I was at recently.
Effortless Mastery, by the way, is the only book I've read in like 10 years. So don't, if we're going to start a conversation about books, let's not.
Let's not? Okay. Well, there you go. We know our limits. You know? That's very nice. So say that again, about letting it go, because I want to hear you talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's just like what's stopping you from reaching your full potential, and this can apply to, I mean, like anything really, like any sort of like artistic discipline or otherwise, I suppose, right? What's stopping you from reaching your full potential is your ego worrying about getting there, right? Because that's how you get in your head about it.
Yeah.
Right. You sit down at sit down at the guitar, sit down at the piano, whatever your instrument is, right? And you're like, I gotta be a better guitar player than Angus Young, right? Like that's stopping you from practicing adequately.
Yeah.
You have to let that go. And not only are you not going to reach your full potential, you're not going to enjoy the journey as well.
Yeah.
You can sit down and, I mean, obviously there's, honing your craft, so you're going to practice well, right? But if you're constantly worried about being better than everyone else, like you're not going to get there ever.
Yeah.
That's like, I mean, you might think that you got there, but yeah, like the book is kind of about like even if you think that you've gotten there, if you're still concerned about your ego and being better than that person or being the best guitar player, you still have space to move forward. Like you can still be even better than you are, right? So until you let that go, you'll never progress as far as you could.
That's true.
Which is a really hard thing to apply and to sort of wrap your head around.
Well, maybe one avenue of applying that, or to maybe even to understand it, the way I'm interpreting it is, let's say I am worried about not being better than that guitar player. Let's assume that guitar player is a very good rock musician. I don't know and a person's still alive and they're still making music and they're still making records. I can't even say I want to be better than them because I can't define them. Now there can be an argument made for I want to be better than Charlie Parker, for example, because he's dead. There's a limit to what he's done. Therefore, the potential of somebody dedicating their entire life to learn everything he's ever done, playing everything exactly he's played, can potentially be objectively better than him, assuming that you've done everything that he's done in his lifetime, because there is an end to that lifetime. It's not continuing with you. So in that way, you can know Charlie Parker to actually then compare yourself to him to some degree. But even then, it's a weak argument. But let's say we're comparing ourselves to somebody who's already living, somebody we admire, somebody we appreciate. You can't at all. There's no argument there, no actual concrete way to compare yourself because you can't define who they are. So the question then becomes, who am I? And that's the only thing that you can actually obtain to some degree, because you will die with yourself. And therefore you will know your limits, and therefore you will know when and how to set those frames, those boundaries, those domains of definition of what good and bad is. Am I good at this major scale? Am I good at this entire discography? Can I, there's all this different realms of comparison within yourself, because you can define it for yourself, and only you can. But you can't necessarily define somebody else, especially if they're living. And it's only a weak argument for those who are dead. And in that way, it kind of just really points to the absurdity of comparison. But it also points to the utility of framing issues, or setting bounds and variables of which to compare yourself in. Because in order to measure progress, you have to have some method of measurement. In music, it's very vague compared to math, where it's like 100% or nothing, really. There's a logic in there, but there can be a logic applied to how we approach practice in music and our own progression. But it's up to us to decide on what those terms are, and only we can do that. So I think there is a lot of utility in that, in the beginning conversation of that comparison, not necessarily falling into comparison. But I really appreciate that if you do fall into ego all the time, you're just not being productive. You can't progress without acknowledging that, to let it go. But I think that's what I described, I think, is the utility aspect of that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm just thinking about like what, like when we take the musician that wants to be better than Charlie Parker, like what does better mean? You know?
Yeah.
Charlie Parker he took a musical style and invented one, essentially, right? You know what I mean? Like he pushed that style of music and that tradition to a new level, which is different from being able to play all those notes and be as technically capable as Charlie Parker. Like you can be technically as capable and play all those licks, but it's also the fact that he innovated.
Yeah.
Right? Which is increasingly harder to do, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I always think about that with music. Do you know what Vsauce is?
Yeah.
There's this Vsauce episode about like, will we ever run out of music? Which it's funny. It's something people always think about, right? It's okay, there's only 12 notes, and if the songs are only 4 minutes on the radio, and what's the mathematical equation of the combination of songs we can, like, will that run out? Right? In that video, he puts the parameters on it, right? He's like, okay, 12 tones, these are the only rhythms we're working with. The song is at this BPM and it's only runs for 4 minutes, right? And then this equation runs through all the different possible combinations of notes, right? And it comes up with this number that's huge. These are the different combinations, right? And then he goes, to put this in comparison, this is the number of seconds of how long the world has existed for. Like, there's a number of seconds that the Earth has just been a thing.
Yeah.
And then the number of combinations for music is just longer.
Oh.
Right? So
yeah.
But it is so it's an interesting thing to think about, right? Just like how much music is out there and like where music is now, and what popular music used to be, what popular music is now, and like yeah, what's the next thing? Like, what's the next Charlie Parker? And maybe that's a thing of the past. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like inventing styles and genres, and like heavy metal used to be heavy metal, and I'm a metal fan, right? And so heavy metal used to be heavy metal. Now there's a million subgenres of heavy metal, and some people like defend those titles furiously. And same thing with rock music, and same thing with like improvised music, and same thing with country music, and just like how many more things can you?
Yeah.
And now we've got genres called like post rock, like after rock. What comes after post rock?
Post rock, of course.
Right? You know what I mean?
Double post rock,
Post hardcore. I don't know.
Oh god. Yeah. Genre defining, I remember even in that critical perspectives class, that was a big topic of confusion for me. I never was somebody who naturally gravitated towards genres. I just liked what I liked, whether it's this or that. And I always try to see things on an individual basis, whether it's one artist or one singer in that band, if they happen to change over time. And to me, just like what that band wants to say. And if they do it in a certain way, then they do it in a certain way. But I can never be like, I like these 3 rock bands, and then say I'm a fan of rock music. Like, no, I like these 3 bands. I don't necessarily like rock music per se.
Interesting. I've just gravitated towards like the more blanket terms, like rock music. Maybe just because it's easier. Like I like heavy metal, but I'm like I don't know. There's certain bands certain fan bases that would say this band is heavy metal, and I might either disagree or not like it. Right. But yeah, I consider myself a rock guitarist over almost everything, or jazz guitarist and a rock guitarist, right? Yeah, but obviously like I really enjoy like specific types of rock music sometimes, like math rock, and I had a post rock phase as well. And yeah,
I like that.
Same thing with heavy metal too. Like I had a phase where like I was really into like what you might call gent, or like hardcore music, and then you get into like hardcore punk, like certain bands, and like progressive metal and different technical death metal or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like the trajectory that you're describing is an endless rabbit hole of trying to categorize things, really.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe my perspective on that is I understand that there's like you're pointing to a general direction and sometimes more specific than other times. For example, rock is a very general direction, but a direction. And then you get into gent and all the other types of categories you're describing. For me, I think in contrast to pointing to a general direction, I just want to put the finger on the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I want to tell you what I like, I want to say I like this as plainly as I can. And if that means just simply saying I like this artist and this song, check it out. Here's 30 seconds of it.
Mm-hmm.
And this me spending 30 seconds to share you a little excerpt of a recording is to me a better 30 seconds well spent to tell you, to communicate to you that this is what I like, rather than trying to explain the genres in pointing to the general
Like you're
direction.
saying, listen to this 30 seconds of this song, and this is what I like, rather
Yeah.
than trying to describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like I want to give you the address of where I'm going rather than giving you the directions
Mm-hmm.
to the city of where that address is located in a way. But it doesn't work for everybody, and it also doesn't work for all contexts. So I understand where just saying rock is maybe easier, more simple to some degree in conversation. I guess in some ways it's hard for me to have those conversations in general terms because I just feel like I'm not saying exactly what I want to say, especially if somebody's asking me, what do you like to listen to? For example, I can say, I like to listen to Don Shirley, piano player. I recently watched The Green Book, that's why I listened to him. But I can't say I like to listen to jazz pianist, or I can't say I like to listen to jazz, because Don Shirley and Bill Evans are completely different. I enjoy both of them very much the same. I enjoy them a lot, but they're very different, and it feels very different. And my relationship with that music is very different. So I would say Don Shirley rather than jazz piano, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I find one perspective I have on music that's been quite enlightening, and I think I want to bring it back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, is making music, recording music in particular, is we borrow time and we stop time in a way to capture sound that's happened through time and encapsulate it in a recording. Therefore, we've distilled a refinement of sound within a specific time that will live forever. We've kind of sacrificed our time of living to produce this thing that will be timeless. So whatever that 3 minutes and 30-second song is going to be, it's going to be there forever. But we've done so in a way where we craft it in a way where we're saying that this is now going to exist forever, far beyond our time, our own living time. So in a way, when I listened to Don Shirley this morning, it felt like part of him was living in the room with me. Live performance, very authentic, just him playing the piano with his bass player. And that felt very authentic to me. It felt like that was what a music recording should sound like in a way. It's somebody living and sharing their life snippets of the time in that recording. And that's the sacrifice being made in why it's meaningful. And the reason why I mentioned sacrifice is because I think we mentioned earlier on in our conversation how choosing to focus on one thing rather than the other has been always kind of this exploratory process of how do we manage our time, what do we practice, and how do we practice in certain things. So when we focus our time on one thing, we're not focusing on 10 other things that we could be focusing on. And why we choose to focus on the one thing is a complex of who we are and what we value and what is meaningful to us. And it all accumulates to us being in the studio, for example, to play that thing that we spent all our time to do. And now that thing that we did in the studio is not going to live on forever in that curated snippet of time. And in a way, that's what's meaningful. That's what we try to make is meaningful. But all the steps to get there is practice, taking lessons, learning how to wrap our gear and take care of our gear, going to school and managing all of that stage in our lives. It all accumulates to distilling our sacrificed time to now this thing that can live forever.
Right. That's kind of how I viewed the RONI album a little bit, and a lot like other recordings that I've done as well, where it's like I just want this to kind of like exist somewhere, and then I can move on from it.
Yes.
Not that like we're trying to move on from RONI per se, but like I just want it to be, like it's out there, like it existed, and this is like the proof of it. That's how I felt about like the Punch You EP. Made a few like off the floor like videos with another band I had with Nate and Jake in high school that we were very proud of. and it was like an instrumental like prog rock trio essentially, the three of us, and we did 2 videos, and eventually like what we were doing together turned into Punchu. It was sort like give or take a few jam sessions. But I'm just like, I was very happy to move on from that project because we had those 2 videos, and I'm still very proud of them and happy that they exist out there.
Yeah.
But I think also like how do you view the recorded sound in terms of like how important it is to being a musician, right? Because it sounds like you like the recorded sound when it's like closer to a live performance. Like that's actually a better snippet of like what happened in time, right? Yeah. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about this at all, but whatever. I'm going to talk about it anyway. So you remember in first year at Humber when Pat Metheny played in the auditorium, we weren't supposed to talk about it?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Sort of, yes. I remember I was there.
Yeah. So he was the artist in residence.
I think I wrote a paragraph or 2 about that, I think.
Yeah. Like usually the artist in residence will like do a concert at the end of the week. He technically wasn't supposed to because he had one of those agreements with a venue where he's not supposed to play either. I don't know if it was he's not supposed to play in Toronto for like 6 months leading up to a show, or if it was like in a neighboring city in Canada. I don't know, but he wasn't supposed to play in Toronto. So it was like a closed door, just come to the auditorium at this time and you'll see what happens kind of deal.
Right.
Yeah. And then someone in the front row, some idiot, Alyssa and I were talking about this, like the audacity of this student to like record it. You know what I mean? Like they did a really bad job at hiding it too, because Pat Metheny on the stage stopped the concert and said, "Hey man, stop," and like dressed him down in front of the whole auditorium. Nice. That's not cool. Like I'm giving you a concert when I shouldn't right now. Anyways, I think about the recording on that person's phone. You know?
Yeah.
The only recording that would have existed of this secret concert with Pat Metheny and Mike Downs and Mark Kelso.
Yeah.
And in that specific moment, right? And that's different from like that's different from any other like studio recording, right? That's a true moment in time, because they weren't going to do more than one take of all those songs. Those solos only existed once.
Yeah, there's a guy, I forgot his name, Lenny something.
Lenny Bro?
Not Lenny Bro, but it was this guy who documented a lot of field recordings back in the day of the early jazz times, early blues south of in America. And it was one of those ancient like tape recorder types of things. One of the earliest recordings of Charlie Parker is one of the things that he did. And he was a historian, and that was kind of where his recording prowess kind of came from that point of view of documentation, referencing. So when it comes to my perspective on like a live performance, when I mentioned Don Shirley, in a way it captures more of that feeling that it's just a documentation of the moment rather than like a production, like a music production. But I see recorded music as a spectrum from it being authentic, just documentation of a live performance, to it being a documentation of the musical idea.
Yeah, I always really appreciated that picture of the sliding scale, and it's really helpful when you're thinking about going to record music as well, right?
Yes,
like,
yes.
do you want your bed tracks to be drums, guitar, and bass, or is it just drums, or using scratch tracks? And that like kind of places it somewhere on the scale as well, right?
Yeah.
Or like Punchu recorded all of our instruments separately, right? And with the high T demos, we recorded all 4 instruments at the same time. Wow. And so yeah, so we're still like in the works of how we'll actually do it for real. And yeah, same thing with RONI, we record all the instruments separately, right? So yeah, I always appreciated that sliding scale.
Yeah, the sliding scale is very interesting, because your relationship to that sound as a musician creating the sound will change as what approach you take to it. And at the same time, the listener subconsciously or consciously will react to it differently, where you can record everything separately and produce it very well in a studio and make it sound like it's a very modern thing. But then you play that live and everyone's like, I love the live version, or I love the studio version. There's a certain feeling captured in both of it. But I think the feeling of the creation of that, the feeling that the music is meant to convey, the purpose of the music, I think should be not the same necessarily, but has to translate across both disciplines. And I think if it doesn't, then it's missing something. It wasn't clear. The clarity of the musical idea wasn't there. Therefore, you can't really place it on the spectrum exactly.
Yeah. So you're saying that are you speaking to like a composition that should be able to be like recording in the studio and you do a live recording, and it should be able to sort of
The
carry its
impact, I
own weight
think,
either way?
should be considered for both,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily equate on both.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if the musician is responsible for performing it or recording it doesn't take into account how can be conveyed, or like take care of how it's meant to be presented in different situations, um, and, and and therefore lose the connection of the musical idea, kind of the essence of it, then I think that's kind of an irresponsible move in that regard. For example, one of the songs that Full Deck does is called Nothing. The recording version was done with the 4-piece back in the day. Now that we play as a trio, we've kind of rearranged it in a certain way where I do a couple more solos, the soul form is changed, but it still captures the feeling of the song. And I think we've all agreed as the songwriters that the way we do it live is very different than a studio recording, but it still captures the feeling what we want the song to be and what the song is meant to be. And therefore, we've found our happy balance of how we play live versus its differences to the studio recording. And it feels like the reception from the audience, both who listen to the record and have been at the live shows, have the same understanding of that as well. So we've kind of verified and tested that our intentions have been received and are clear in both regards. And to me, that's a successful product. Like,
Yeah.
we've accomplished that goal.
Yeah. I feel it's important to attempt. I mean, RONI never did this, but it's important to attempt to play the music live. I think that really helps with the recording process.
Yeah.
Just to hash that stuff out on stage. I mean, RONI jammed a lot, so it's not like we didn't play together as a band. Like we did perform all of the songs together in a room. Like, we had rehearsals before we actually recorded, which I think is super important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think, like, I would like to make another trio record relatively soon. When I say that, in the coming years, I'd like to do that. But I know for sure before I do that, I want to play a lot with whoever, either with the musicians I'd like to record with, or I'd like to play the songs I would like to record on a stage somewhere, even if there's only 2 people in the audience, right?
Yeah. I like that you have an emphasis on wanting the music just to exist.
Yeah.
I feel that way about that as well in a lot of situations. It leaves the door open to all your considerations, whether it's playing with musicians or where you want to play. It kind of doesn't constrict you and being like, I want to play at that venue and it's got to look like this and the room's got to be packed. Like, you don't have to get into this fantasy in a way. It's like you keep it open to reality.
I just don't want to forget about it too. I mean, like, that trio I talked about from high school, like, I would have easily forgotten about those compositions. So I'm just really glad they're there. And I mean, there's some punchy songs I forget how to play, but the ones in the EP, like, those are some of the first ones like we wrote together. I'm really glad that those are there. All the songs in my final recital at Humber, like, I'm glad there's a video of that. Most of those songs I'll probably never perform again, just because, like, I've kind of moved on from them. So I'm just kind of glad it's there, so I don't forget about it.
Yeah,
that
way as well.
That's why it's important to even, like, just record yourself playing, like, on your phone, right? Like, if you're not, like, recording a lot, just, like, record yourself on your phone. Like, especially if you're writing original music, right? Record your songs. If not for anyone else, for yourself. For 10 years down the road, go listen to the song that you were working on, right?
Yeah, I fully appreciate that motivation. I'm working on my own album called Timeless, and a lot of it's based off of, like, remembering the things that you may have forgotten but didn't for various amount of reasons. With music, when you play a musical idea, it's so potent because you attach memories and feelings to it. You attach eras and periods of time in your life, and that helps you reflect on things. The context of which you make it in, the way you play it in, the way you present it, the way you look back on it, all define certain parts, different moments in your life as you go forward, which helps kind of bring back the memories in a way that's meaningful. It's more clear than you just like reading in a journal, for example, like 10 years ago, I went to the washroom or something like that. It's not as potent as a journal entry or even like a home video.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, home videos are great. They're very visually oriented, but sometimes you lose your own experience in that. And music has a certain way of kind of filling in that gap,
Mm-hmm.
that connection to that. So in that way, it's really important to record things and to do so with the intention that one day I want to look back at this and get something out of it.
Yeah.
Because this was meaningful to me.
For sure. And I always like to joke around, you need footage for the documentary, for the Karandeep documentary in 10 years or 20 or 30. You need some footage. This will probably be on it. Or my documentary. I don't know.
Hell yeah. Either the documentary or the obituary.
Yeah.
I see it both ways.
And that's okay too, right? Or your 50th birthday party when someone puts together a slideshow.
Yeah. That's the dream, eh?
Yeah. A slideshow being made for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that day.
I'm joking. Please, no one make me a slideshow. A carousel post on Instagram is okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Assuming Instagram's still kicking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think that it won't be?
You never know.
You never know. MySpace is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all crave a MySpace today.
Mm-hmm. Also, the social media landscape is crazy. I mean, we still have, like Instagram and Snapchat and Twitter, X, whatever the heck you want to call it, and Facebook, but it looks completely different from what it did 10 years ago,
And our intentions with all of it too has changed because of its feedback to us as well.
Yeah.
That's a whole other
I know, it's interesting. It's not like, is Instagram still going to exist? It's more like, it's more likely what is it going to look like in 10 years than is it still going to be around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I think it's like, it's one of those companies like Apple. It's been around for so long. It's less like, is it still going to be around? More like, what is it going to look like?
Yeah.
But also like, I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to technology. Rest in peace, the BlackBerry. Everyone loved that. And that's gone now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, I see it as like kind of just like the spectrum of authentic documentation versus musical idea creation, where it's the musical idea has to go through transformations, where the documentation aspect is as it was. And then in order for like a technology company, for example, to see it throughout time, they have to transform it through the things. But at a certain point, they come so far away from what it was that they can't pinpoint to what it was.
Yeah, like do you ever think about that in terms of like I don't know if you have a band that you were obsessed with in like high school or something and then they still make music now? It's just like
Billy Talent.
Okay, so like I love Billy Talent 1, everyone does, and Billy Talent 2 is also great. Billy Talent 3 is not as good as the first two, but it's still okay.
Yep.
And then what was the fourth one? Dead Silence? Dead Silence was Viking Death March on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good song, and that album has its moments, but then, like, what was the one after Dead Silence? I listened to that one, but I forgot the name of it.
For that one.
Something about ghost ship dead. There's something on a ghost ship.
Yeah, I think there's, like, blue and green artwork or something like that.
Yeah.
Either that or the red one. There's a red one.
Yeah. Okay, so same, I love Billy Talent, 1, 2, and 3 in high school, and it's one of those things where it's like, I had never heard that sound before when you listen to Billy Talent 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then you kind of work your way through the discography and you're like, you make your way to Dead Silence and it's like, okay, like we're kind of coming up with some riffs here that are kind of cool. You make it to the fifth album and then the sixth album and you're like, it's starting to all sound the same.
Yeah.
Right? And like, do you ever wish that like Billy Talent kept evolving like Apple did to a point where they don't recognize it from the first album? Because there's some bands that have done that. Right? I mean, like, I think like Radiohead is a good example of just like the sound morphing into something unrecognizable. But yeah, do you ever wish that like certain bands did that? I'm gonna give you another example. I was a big fan of Dream Theater when I was in high school, and I still sort of am. And they have, I don't know, something like 16 or 17 albums out.
Wow.
Right? And like, the new stuff is all starting to sound just like the same to me. Whereas like the first like 10 albums, every single time it was new.
Wow.
Right? I almost wish that Dream Theater didn't sound like Dream Theater anymore,
Right,
right? Like I wish
right.
they were surprising me, but they're not.
Well, I think that kind of comes back to what the essence of it is. Is it the sound or is it what the musicians create? And I think that's the trick here, where when you build a relationship with a band, you know, really like what they do, and you can see the potential of them transforming as time goes on. The question isn't what is the sound of their new record going to be. It's the focus is going to be what are the musicians going to create this time.
Mm-hmm.
And if it seems like the musicians are going to create the same thing every single time, now you're kind of like, oh, is there potential? Are they not realizing their potential?
And is that because they're occupied and like no shade to them? Is that just because they're occupied with their career, which includes pumping out an album and touring and like all this like meet and greets, whatever the band does, right? Like festivals and what have you. Are they just like they're really occupied with that sort of stuff? And I suppose like a band gets so big that you have to be careful kind of balancing, you know, the old sound with the new sound if you want to keep playing like the Rogers Center or whatever,
Right,
right?
right.
But like, do you wish that Billy Talent? I mean, it sounds like you're like, oh yeah, Billy Talent 1, 2, 3, and Dead Silence,
Yeah,
right?
I'm with you.
But we can't name the fifth album.
Yeah.
Like, do you wish Billy Talent had kept like, what if Billy Talent was like, okay, Billy Talent 4, 5, 6, 7, okay, this is awesome, and then all of a sudden Billy Talent 8 sounds nothing like Billy Talent 3. It doesn't even sound like Billy Talent anymore. Like, do you wish that was a thing?
I
I
do.
kind of do.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Because then we'd still be talking about those albums.
Yes. I mean, Kendrick's new album, GNX, is kind of like that for me. But going back to Billy Talent, I think I do not only for, wow, very cool, Billy Talent's new record is very interesting. It's more like, I think the musicians are having a good time.
Yeah. And
They're doing something.
yeah,
You know?
sure.
And not to say that they're not having a good time playing the music they're playing right now,
Mhm.
but I think that's on the, as like one creator to another creator, it's like, I'm excited for people to explore new territory. And I obviously have a connection with that band. And therefore, it's more than just a sound that I enjoy the song. It's like, I care about the band people, you know, the individuals in that band. And therefore, if they created something new, it's like, wow, I wonder what they did to get there. I wonder how they transformed, what their story is, how they've grown. That's exciting to me. It's not just the sound; it's a lot how the sound was made,
Mhm.
you know, and it's from the people. So yeah, I would be excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might not like it, but
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. True. Fair enough. Yeah. You might not like the new sound as well, for sure. And you know, there's just always going to be the fans that are like, this doesn't sound like Billy Talent or whatever, right?
That's how I felt about people getting stuck with genre defining.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't rock. This is not rock music,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I guess that's a similar dilemma in a way.
Yeah. And I haven't listened to enough Radiohead to be an authority on speaking about the band, but I mean, like, I just wonder, like, are they like an anomaly? Like, I mean, like, In Rainbows sounds like so different from like the Bends, right?
Yeah.
Which like sounds so different from like, okay, Computer, right? So
To me, that's just very impressive.
yeah.
Because it's not just like, well, they have to conceptualize the sounds, create the sounds, reproduce them, record them, critique them, and then perform them as time goes on. Like, that's just a mastery of tone, really. You know, it's like you have all these pedals, but damn, they can actually use the pedals. You know,
Mm-hmm.
assuming that they have pedals. But
And I think their fans like have trust them as well,
yeah,
and so that kind of allows, you know, more room for
that's
growth.
true, because it is a feedback. There's a conversation happening
Mhm.
with that. You mentioned with imagine like a band going touring and meet and greets and stuff like that. That is work that they are now motivated to do because of their fan base. But if their fan base is in a way inadvertently motivated to create the same sounds over and over again, they may get stuck in a loop in a way that also is working against them as far as progressing as a band in the future. So it's tough to be authentic while at the same time progressing, because the lines get blurred very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You thinking you're authentic, serving your fans and playing the music that you love, not realizing that you could have been doing something way off in the, you know, on left field that maybe have rubbed against some of those fans, but knowing that it is the best thing moving forward. In a way, it's kind of like gambling. It's kind of like investing.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, like which way am I going to go? Yeah, and so, you know, it's entirely possible for like a band to not be able to play venues as big as they used to, right?
Yeah.
For that reason. When I was playing hockey in high school or maybe before that, there was a kid on my team, and his dad played drums for a band called Platinum Blonde. Do you know Platinum Blonde?
Sounds familiar.
Crying Over You was one of their popular singles, but they were a big pop band.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember, and I don't know, it's just like bands like that where it's like, man, this band is still playing. Because I remember, like, okay, this kid's dad plays in this band, and so like he would tell us about like kind of the shows he's playing, and they had a new album out, and I remember like thinking, man, Platinum Blonde must have been like a band that like played stadiums and played festivals, and like they were on the radio and they toured with so and so. But they're still out there. They're still making music, but like they're not playing the Rogers Center.
Yeah.
Because I don't think so.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I have to use the washroom.
Me too.
What do you say we call it?
Yeah, sounds good.
Great.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely.
This is so much fun.
Yeah.
Like I said, kind of like fulfilling like a thing. This is so cool. It looks good in here, and I get to talk about myself.
Everyone likes talking about themselves. So
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Feels
Well,
good.
if you ever want to talk to yourself about yourself,
I talk to myself all the time.
That's true. Me too.
But if I want to talk with a real person, yeah,
you're always welcome.
Thanks, man.
There's lots more to talk about. You're a creative mastermind, and you are like a Zen character moving through the world.
Thank you.
Yeah. Geraden Smith, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey. All right. Brilliant. You go first.